The Institute for Divorce Financial Analysts, IDFA, is a proud sponsor of Purse Strings. IDFA is the premier organization dedicated to the certification, education, and promotion of the use of financial professionals in the divorce arena. IDFA provides specialized training to accounting, financial, and legal professionals in the field of pre-divorce financial planning. To find out more about earning the Certified Divorce Financial Analyst designation, visit institutedfa.com.
Thank you, fearless listeners, and go you for hitting play. Please like and subscribe as it helps us grow. Also, share this with a friend as we have to keep talking about this shit. Now let's dive in.
Coming up on today's edition of Women in Money, the shit we don't talk about, our guest is Olivia St. Clair Long.
Olivia is one of our Purse Strings approved professionals and is right here near us in Evanston, Illinois.
Yes, and we're so pleased to have Olivia with us today. She's known for her straight answers, clear options, and creative legal solutions.
If you're going through a divorce or contemplating divorce, then take a minute to listen to the advice from Olivia St. Clair Long. She will share her expertise, insight, and tips to navigate this harrowing time.
Let's jump in and get started.
Gloria Steinem once said, "We will never solve the feminization of power until we solve the masculinity of wealth." Barbara Provost and Maggie Nielsen are the team at Purse Strings that will help you navigate the ins and outs of financial independence so that you can be financially fearless. This is Women in Money, the shit we don't talk about.
Hey, Olivia, we are so glad you joined us today. Could you take a minute to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi, absolutely, and thank you so much for having me. My name is Olivia St. Clair Long. My firm's name is O Long Law, LLC, and we are based in Evanston, Illinois, so here we are in Chicagoland, and we really pride ourselves on providing clarity and closure in family law matters. So a little bit about me. I started my firm 5 years ago. Prior to that, I worked in major law firms, mostly in commercial litigation and white-collar criminal defense. But I actually started in family law when I was a kid. I was 16 the first time I started working in a family law firm. So I've made my way back after a long detour. I moved to Chicago from California in 2006 to attend law school at the University of Chicago Law School. And I stayed here ever since. I really love it here. So I'm here. I live here in Evanston. I have a wife, I have a son, and I have a pit bull named Westside. So that's a little bit about me.
What a great intro. And you stayed in Chicagoland area, even though you're from California. That's brave.
It's brave. And also in 2009, it wasn't as brave as it sounds because I had a job. And in 2009, having a job was a big deal. Mm-hmm. And then I got married and divorced. And then I got married again. And I've been married again for 8 years.
Congratulations. Well, it sounds like you've been through the divorce process as well. So let's get started and talk about it. Maggie, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, we have a free download called What to Do Before You Mention the D Word, and it's a comprehensive list of all the documents you should collect when considering divorce. Olivia, what are the first steps you advise doing when considering divorce?
Sure. So when people are considering divorce, there are a lot of different kind of situations you may find yourself in. One of the more shocking things I find that I give advice and people are surprised by is I tell them, like, listen, you're going to have to do a little bit of like cybersecurity stuff. You're going to have to make sure that your password and your passcode on your phone are different than they were. If you don't have a laptop or a different computer of your own, you might want to get one. You might not want to use a shared family computer to do certain things that are going to be prep for your divorce. You could also go to a public library and use a portal there. And then, for example, if you have financial accounts for your retirement, bank accounts, credit card accounts, and investment accounts, you want to set up your own login for each of those accounts with a login and password of your own that's kept somewhere else, not it's somewhere that your partner could access it, so that if your partner decides that they don't want you accessing one of those accounts anymore, that you would have your own portal in which to access the account. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people basically get cut off from access to accounts that they used to share with someone because they never took the time to develop their own login, their separate login for it. And sometimes like they can never get back into that account because turns out their ex spends it all on legal fees or something.
Wow, yeah, that makes a lot of sense in every point. I understand why you'd want to change all that information. And, another great tip that we always hear with that is open up your own email address that's new and private to you and probably hook up those accounts to this new email.
Oh, absolutely. And you can open your account that's new and private to you. And if it's not too annoying, you can open an account that's only for your divorce, right? So I could open an account that said like Olivia Split at gmail.com. That one's for free for one of the millions of people named Olivia. But like I could open that and I could decide that that is the email that I'm going to use to communicate with my team, my attorneys, my therapists, whoever else is on my email, because then I don't get massively triggered opening my regular email
Smart.
where I'm going to see a whole bunch of divorce stuff in there. And then I can also very cathartically make that go away completely when my divorce is over. And then I just finish it and it's done, right? I would not use that email necessarily as the one for my accounts, though. I would just open up two different ones, one for the divorce communication and one for making sure that my money stays in my control as much as possible. And I would open my own new bank account. I would open my own new bank account. I would open my own new credit card. I would go to like nerdwallet.com or bankrate.com and just see, where is a credit card that I can use. With a bank account, let's say you're in a situation where you really feel that your money is very closely observed by your partner. Maybe you don't want to go direct depositing your your paycheck into a new bank account right away because it's just a lot of rocking the boat. You could always go to the grocery store and get cash back in like small increments, $20 or $40, and open a bank account with $40 that you got cash back off of the debit card that you bought groceries with that week. And then you have it, it's there, it's separate. You've got a place to change your direct deposit to when it's time to do that. And you just have a separate bank account and your ducks are in a row a little bit.
Those are great tips. And it sounds like prep work, right? Like maybe those are some of the things you want to do before you even mention the D word or as soon as it's mentioned in order to prep yourself for kind of what's going to be coming at you.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people, when they speak to me, not by calling me as their lawyer, right? People, when I talk to them just in life, because by the time you called a lawyer, sometimes it's a little different, right? Like you are a little bit more prepped by the time you're actually speaking to someone who is a divorce lawyer. But many, many people consider it for years before they actually speak about it or do it. It's very unreal to them. And then they want to take some concrete steps before they call a lawyer so they can kind of see how it feels. They can organize their thoughts. And women, especially, a lot of women really like to be prepared. They want to make sure that there are as few variables as possible. And they want to exert some control over some part of their life before they, really get into a very uncontrollable environment in a divorce, which mostly is what it feels like to people.
Well, that's a great segue to our next question, which is, what is typically the divorce process? I've been through it. You've been through it. It's probably different for both of us, but nonetheless, there's probably still a somewhat defined process involved. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, certainly. There's a range, right? And the range goes from people who have been married for a relatively short time and don't have children, or else a very long time and don't have children who are children anymore. And those are almost the same type of case. It's oftentimes something where people can see the costs and benefits very clearly. They can see, why would I spend a ton of money getting divorced from this person? Basically, the relationship is over and we just need to get away from each other. When you're younger and it's a shorter relationship, you don't really have that much to split usually. When you're older and it's a longer relationship, although you may have a lot to split, if you don't have minor children, there are just a lot fewer variables to divide. And maybe you have like a lot of equity in the house, for example, or like you don't have a mortgage anymore. So there's just some more assets a lot of times to split and both people can kind of be okay. Then there's the murky middle, right? Where there are people who have medium length marriages between 10 and 30 years. They have minor children. They have disabled children. They have other people that they do caretaking for. They have not enough money. They have a lot of money and complicated assets. So these are all factors that change the way that divorce goes for folks. Overall, the way to make it easier, which is much easier said than done, is to agree on as many things as possible. Now, you're getting divorced, so that's easy for me to say, right? Mm-hmm. But if you can agree on as many things as possible, then that's the biggest predictor of getting out of this thing as much unscathed as you can. If you can reach some certain basic agreements, then that is a couple that we can divorce and preserve as much about the family that's good as possible and make it as much of a preservation of assets as possible and not just spend $100,000 on legal fees. The ones that are difficult are ones where there's domestic violence, there are coercive control dynamics, there's a lot of enmity and contempt. There's just a lot of the uglier stuff already in the relationship, and that only gets worse in divorce.
Wow, yeah, it does make sense how there's these totally two different kind of types of divorce. And we do talk a lot about, when you're separating these assets and stuff, we have to remove the emotion behind these items because otherwise we're spending a lot in arguments and legal fees when it's like we're fighting over, I saw this post where they were fighting over, the outdoor patio set, which is
Got
really
one now where
like,
they're fighting over a couch.
Yeah.
The couch is $1,800 and one bought it on this credit card. They want to split the debt differently because I said, she should keep her debt herself, like anything that was incurred in her name, she wishes to keep because since they have separated, they're not divorced yet. Since they have separated, she's been on a really, really aggressive debt repayment plan. So her debts, the debts that are in her name, all debts in Illinois are marital if they were spent on a marital purpose, which is almost anything. Buying your girlfriend a diamond bracelet is not a marital purpose. Almost everything else is. So her credit cards had a lot of money. His credit cards had a lot of money. She's been aggressively paying down the debt since separation. He hasn't. So we want all the debt in each of their names to be the debt that they keep after the marriage. And he kept saying no. And finally I said, why do you not want to do that? Why do you want to aggregate all the debt and split it 50-50? Well, because I bought the couch and she took it when we moved out of the house and sold it. And I spent $1,800 on that couch. I can't tell you how many thousands of dollars I spent fighting over this debt allocation. Turns out it was on less than $2,000 worth of a couch.
Yeah, they just spent more in lawyer fees right there.
Easily.
And so it's, really figuring out what is important to you and what do you really value and trying to, I know, easier said than done, but to remove the emotion out of it as well.
Well, and many times it's somebody feels like they want to win, they don't want to be in the losing seat. But again, that all comes with emotion as well. So what does that really mean? So it's crazy.
It is. And it's really, sometimes I have to say things that are not very comforting, which is, a lot of people think that the definition of a good settlement or a good compromise is one in which no one is happy. But that sort of matches the vibe of the situation, right? You're getting divorced. It's not a very happy situation. So you're not going to walk away necessarily. You can walk away feeling at peace. You can walk away feeling set up for your next chapter. You can walk away feeling resigned and a little bit like the end of a sad movie, right? You can feel that feeling, which is not necessarily bad. But I don't know that many people who walk away really happy from one of those more complicated divorces. From the, first half of ones, from ones that maybe they've wanted it for a really long time and they ended up getting out relatively unscathed, that's happy. But a lot of times they come in with expectations that have been adjusted accordingly. So, sometimes the secret to happiness is low expectations.
I've seen that before. I think that's absolutely true. You have some expectations about what you're going to walk away with. I know in a situation where the woman thought she was going to get half of everything, and I don't believe that's true in Illinois. So she didn't.
Well,
do
it's not
research.
necessarily true.
Yeah,
right. It's not necessarily true. So it's often true, but it's not necessarily true. There is not a rule that says that you have to divide it in Illinois 50-50 or any way. You just have to divide it in a way that is not unfair. So you don't divide it in a way that's fair. You divide it in a way that's not obviously unfair to the judge where they're like nobody in their right mind. That's called unconscionable. If it's not unconscionable, the judge will say yes. So that gives us a lot of leeway in Illinois. Now, the practical effect of this, I go into many situations with judges who are doing like a settlement conference with the parties. And there are only rare instances in which the judge will, the more complicated it is, the more likely the judge is just to go, okay, well, what's wrong with 50-50? Like, let's start with that. Why can't I make this easy and just split the baby? Like, you tell me, Now, one of the deviations that I've seen with respect to 50-50 is if somebody has been a stay-at-home parent for 20 years, a lot of times they will get maintenance and they'll also get more than a 50-50 split of the assets, maybe 55-45, maybe 60-40, because in recognition of the fact that like they don't have the earning capacity ever again to make up the years of retirement investment that they've lost, quote unquote, or that really they contributed to the marriage. And the other person, if they're continuously contributing to their own retirement, they're going to keep on doing that, and their earning power is a lot more robust than the stay-at-home parents. That would be one reason to divide it in a way that's not necessarily 50-50.
Which I kind of love, because the woman did stay at home the whole time, taking care of the kids, raising the kids, and she did miss out on that opportunity of income growth. So a lot of people think, you're favoring one side or the other, but when you look at it, it makes sense. There is no way for her to catch up.
Well, right. And what they try to do, and actually I have this with three men right now who are stay-at-home parents who are the other side in my case, and I represent the mom in several of these cases. And so one of the arguments is the division of labor in a marriage is different in each marriage, but that's what it is. It's a division of labor. So like you could have both parents working and then you could pay 40 grand a year minimum for childcare. Or you could decide, like a lot of people do, hey, I don't want to spend several $1,000s a year on childcare for each of my three young children. Why doesn't one of us just go ahead and stay home? Right? So that's a tangible contribution to the bottom line of the marriage that you can monetize. Arguably the person staying home is saving you between 80 and 120,000 bucks if you would otherwise have three kids in private daycare. Right? So I think of like two lawyers or a doctor and a lawyer or two doctors or something, people who have demanding jobs where before they had kids, they worked 80 hours a week. That's a lot of childcare. It's real expensive.
Yeah.
So it's a tangible contribution, even if it weren't so easily tangible and monetizable. Like I just did math on it. Even if you couldn't do that, it would obviously be an extremely important contribution to the marriage. But the fact is, if you have to pay someone else to do it, is it actually very, very expensive?
Definitely.
Childcare is like another mortgage payment every month.
It really is.
It really is expensive. Yeah.
And so what are some important tips to know when women are making the decision to divorce?
Well, tips to know is such a broad category. I'm thinking of a couple of things. One of the things to know, I would say, is that the court doesn't make the decisions. Generally speaking, people think they're going to lay out their argument about how things should be split and where their kids should go and what their asset split should be. And then the judge is going to tell you what it is. That doesn't happen in the first 6 months or 9 months very often. Usually what will happen is that after you file, you will have several opportunities where people will ask you, all right, so what do you want to do? How do you want to split this? How do you want to negotiate this? What's important to you? What's important to you about your kids? What's important to you about your assets? What's important to you about who gets what kind of support? Or do you have kids in college? Right? There's a lot of legwork for the people in the relationship that several of my clients don't really expect. They don't see in popular culture the fact that when someone says, I'm getting divorced, really the divorce professionals look back at you and say, okay, great, you lead. So that's not something a lot of people expect. I find that extremely comforting because I think nothing, and when I say this to my clients this way, they agree, nothing is more chilling than the idea that you would basically throw yourself at the front of the government, a judge, and say, hey, what do I do with my kids? And then the judge says, well, you're going to do this. And you say, well, I don't want to. And they say, cool, but I said you're going to do that. Like it really takes months and maybe years of parents being completely unable to make an agreement and totally focused on fighting rather than dealing with the kids and making an agreement for a judge to tell you what to do with your kids, which is good. The judge don't like doing it. And it is actually a little bit irrational, I think, to go to a stranger who does not know you and ask what you should do with your children.
Yeah, that would be wild.
Absolutely. That would be crazy.
And people think that, right?
Yeah.
People think that. It's the way that the court process is for people who cannot agree, right? When you go to a judge and have a judge make a decision, it's because you cannot reach an accord. And people need to think about that. Like the court will not lead you. Each of the judges in Cook County have 3,000 cases on their docket. The court's not calling you to see whether you're going to move forward. Can we see you next Thursday? The court's saying, do I have to see you next April?
Wow. That's wild. And I know these, divorces have been backed up. And so it seems like the best decisions that you two can make together is going to be the most productive in getting this thing done.
Right. And so a lot of people, another misconception that people have, a lot of people think that mediation is the same thing as therapy. Mediation is not therapy. So mediation is a guided negotiation that is future focused and solutions oriented. That's different from therapy because therapy is about who did what to whom and how they made each other feel and what are the impediments, right? Mediation can sometimes be assisted by therapy because sometimes there's one just grudge that someone can't get over and then they can't agree. But the purpose of mediation is to say, I hear that you have that grudge. Can you agree to this anyway? Right? It's not about let's figure out where the grudge came from. It's like, can we get over this and move forward? So the reason that mediation can be so cost effective for some people is because and not every case is suited for mediation, but to the extent that they are, mediation begins with agreement. We agree to mediate. Mediation is non-binding, so it really only works if both people are in good faith. And mediation is based on the principle of disclosure. And so that can end up saving you a lot of money compared to litigated divorces because you both get all of your stuff, your documents, and you work together to create a complete picture of the marital estate and each of your own separate property. And then you decide from there, after that big disclosure, you decide from there what to do. So in contrast for litigated divorces, and remember, it's only litigated because people cannot agree. In a litigated divorce, one of the largest cost drivers is discovery. Discovery is, okay, but how much money do you really make? Okay, but how much is your business actually shielding you from us knowing how much you really make? Why did your income go down when you own a business and you have 100% control over how much you pay yourself? And shockingly, the retained earnings in the business actually skyrocketed as soon as you started paying yourself less. What stock options do you actually have for the private corporations you used to work for that are not publicly traded, and how much are they worth? Right? Once you start really diving into someone's finances and they don't want to show you, once they're starting playing defense, that starts to get costly.
And I can imagine that's where things start to heat up a little bit about not wanting to share.
It's sort of like if you're at a position where somebody does not want to give you that information, you're already in an environment that's going to get it expensive.
That makes
right?
sense.
Because you don't have a partner in the process of keeping the costs down. Even when you're divorced and you don't have a partner in life anymore in this person, at least you could have a partner who is a co-parent and a person who doesn't want to waste money. If everybody can agree that we need to co-parent and not waste money, then we're in a situation where we can really keep costs down.
Yeah. And I've had friends that have been fighting in court, and it was just amazing to me what they would fight about and what the attorney fees were for it. It just seemed like somebody wanted to win and wanted the other person to lose. And I just walked away shaking my head. I just can't imagine what the expense was.
Right. And listen, this is a straight up cost benefit analysis. Like there's that University of Chicago, right? Like this is a cost benefit analysis. If I have to sue you to find out how much you make from your business, because you say you make $80,000 a year, but really you make $250,000 a year, you can see why that is a decent use of litigation. Even if I have to litigate to the tune of $20,000, the difference between 80 grand and 250 is so much for the purposes of child support, for the purposes of spousal support, for the purposes of child-related expenses in their division. It's like almost 3 times as much, or it's more than 3 times as much, right? This is an incredible difference, and it is worth finding out, right? There's a house, and maybe it's separate property and maybe it's marital property because of the history of how we've paid for the house and who put what, who put the new wing on with what money and who put the kitchen on. And, it's either going to be the marriage's property, and that's a $500,000 increase in the marriage's estate value, or it's going to be his separate property, and therefore that's 500 grand to him and it's not divisible. That would be a good example of something that can be litigated and that makes sense to litigate it. Yeah. This is about math.
Yes. And I love how you can look at this situation very clearly, very black and white. You can just tell by what you're saying that you've been there, done that. This is the expertise you've provided. This is how clear cut you can look at a situation that's kind of foggy with emotion, and what are the best next steps.
Right. And that's part of my job, is to help people move it back to math from how do I win? Why is this, and so I can say, so why is this valuable to you? Because I'm not getting it, right? Like maybe I don't understand why this is valuable enough to litigate. And so people can tell me a story about why this is valuable to litigate. Sometimes I'm wrong on the math. Sometimes I'm not understanding how valuable the asset is in extremely black and white terms. And sometimes there is one of those grudges or pieces of value or something like that, where this has always been the thing they fought about, and now somebody has to win it. Otherwise, they feel like they've lost everything. That I will try to help someone diffuse, where I just say, can you picture your life without it? If the other person that you were married to doesn't exist, and also this asset doesn't exist, what does that look like for you? How, how could this help you move on if we just imagined a different scenario? So I do a lot of kind of assisting my clients in imagining what the future will look like, because sometimes they're holding on to stuff because this is a horrible time in their life and they don't want to lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea of looking at if your ex didn't have it and you didn't have it, because sometimes it's like, well, if I don't have it, they win, or however that comparison is. But it's like, no, no one has it. It's just out of the abyss. How do you feel? Which makes it a much easier way kind of to get over it.
Yeah, and I think of this especially with like a car or sometimes a boat. If people are fighting over that, I'm just like, you got to remember, it's a depreciating asset. The longer you fight about it, the more worthless it is. Like, if I'm picturing my ex drinking martinis with their new partner who's 10 years younger than me on the boat in the summer, then of course I'm going to be mad, right?
Just don't imagine it that way.
Don't. I mean, like, just remember what my grandfather always said, which is a boat is a hole in the water into which you pour money.
Oh, that's
I
great.
love that.
And maybe it'll feel better when you don't have the boat anymore,
That's great. So, talking about cost, is there a typical cost and time frame that a divorce should take?
Right. We've discussed a lot about the ranges of divorce here, right? We've discussed about how very, very different they can be. And so the fastest one I've ever seen is one of the cheapest ones I've ever seen. And probably mine, we were both lawyers. We did it ourselves. We had no idea what we're doing. We filled out all the paperwork wrong because we weren't divorce attorneys. But we were married for a year. We were in our late 20s. We didn't want anything that the other one had. By the time of filing to the end of it, we were probably divorced. It probably took a month.
Wow.
But we didn't divide anything. We didn't fight about anything. We were just done,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it almost did never get off the ground, the marriage, right? So that's different. But a marriage that's not as cut and dried as that, where there were lawyers hired. I was in a divorce where I was the only lawyer in the deal. So I was representing one person because you can't represent both people. They're on the other side of a lawsuit from each other. But I was the only one there. So I was the one who was doing most of the paperwork. And they had been married for 10 years, no kids. They were just done. They had been living apart for about a year. The one who was a higher earner understood he needed to pay support and was very happy to do it. He wanted his wife to be okay. They came up with a number. They divided all of their assets. They were divorced in 6 weeks, and they probably, pay the court fees together is about $800 with all the court fees you have to pay, and then paying me probably $2,000. So
wow, that's an efficient divorce, but that's not typical
at all. No, that's the only one, and that was like 5 years ago. And then, so for us with uncontested divorces, we charge a flat rate of $4,000, and from that we pay the court fees. So it ends up being about $3,100 to us, and we do handle all of the paperwork and make sure everything is walked through the court system correctly. Which I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy to do it yourself. Like, it's just so confusing, so intimidating, and since the pandemic, so impossible to get anything done in person. So that's the low end. The high end, I mean, like your worst case scenario is like it never really ends because everybody's coming back to fight about the kids until they are over 18. And every round of litigation you have costs between 50 and 100 grand. That's the kind that'll just bankrupt you. Usually someone in that deal is not balanced. Usually one or the other of those parties has either a diagnosed or undiagnosed mental illness. Like, those are less than 2% of the cases that we see in court. Those are the people who use the court system as the dispute resolution forum, which it is. And we are not capable of resolving all disputes because not everybody is rational.
Wow.
Those are the bad ones.
Yeah, I happen to know somebody who went through that as well. So
yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, so there's that. And then I would say that the one that I say to people where I go, pretty soon you're going to be in a situation where it's going to take you 2 years and $100,000. That's each party paying $50,000 for their lawyer, because that comes out of the marriage, right? Your divorce costs come out of the marriage. And people think that the other party is going to have to pay their expenses out of the post-split half that they get, but that's not true. The marriage is going to pay it. I have almost never seen that one spouse had to pay more of the other spouse's fees just because they were quote unquote at fault or because of something they did in the litigation. Generally speaking, they just take it out of the marriage and then they split the marital assets for what's left. But 2 years and $100,000 is a lot more common than you would think.
Wow, that's still, I mean, the time doesn't surprise me post-COVID because I know everything's behind, but that money blows my mind. blows my
It's
mind.
2 years of your kid's college education.
Easy.
Easy.
Yeah, and it takes a long time to recoup $100,000 to re-earn that, reinvest that.
Yeah.
So what's your advice if people are getting divorced? What would you suggest to them?
If people are thinking about getting divorced, I would consider exploring discernment therapy or discernment counseling, which is counseling that is focused on, are we going to get divorced? Which is different from marriage counseling, which is like, how can we stay together? So discernment counseling is one thing that might assist in creating a venue for talking about this in a productive manner. I try really hard to think of what I can advise people to do to make them meet one of the like silly cliches that we have as attorneys, which is criminal law, criminal defense sees the worst people on their best day, and family law sees the best people on the worst day.
Mm-hmm.
Like more than 85% of my clients are, generally speaking, good people who are rational actors mostly, and they're having like the worst month, the worst year of their life. And it's making them have trauma brain. They can't listen to me. They can't take in information. And they're just holding on to every single thread that they potentially possess. Impossible to let anything go or to negotiate because they just feel like everything is crumbling down around them. Do what you got to do to get yourself out of that headspace.
Mm-hmm. That's a real
I've never
great
heard
piece.
of that discernment therapy before, but it's brilliant when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's complete. When you think about it, it's completely different from marriage counseling, right?
Mhm.
When you think about it, marriage counseling should be about the marriage rather than the end of the marriage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Figuring out what you want your life in 3 years to look like and believing you can get there.
I like that.
That helps.
That's a great vision to hold on to, right? That's my end goal right there. And even making, how people make vision boards or statements or drawing a picture on what you want your life to look like and say, that's my direction that I'm heading towards. My decisions are based on getting me there. So that's a great thought. I love that perspective. What other parting thoughts might you have today for our audience?
Sure. I think that people, when they get divorced, I think that they're very surprised about the amount of mourning that it takes to go through a life change as profound as divorce. I think there's still stigma around divorce, unbelievably, despite how incredibly common it is. People still feel that they have failed if they are going through a divorce. And people still feel in many circles perfectly justified in judging someone publicly for having been divorced and it's or getting divorced. And so for that, it's really hard, right? It's really hard to face that stigma and it's really hard to go through it. I would really encourage people to understand that you need to mourn the life that you thought you had or that you thought you would have. You need to understand that what you're going through is grief. You need to deal with the grief that you're going through as though it is actual, legitimate, real life grief, because it is. And once you realize that, I think it might be easier to figure out possessions and their relative lack of importance in life. I distinguish possessions from money. Money is very important. So with respect to possessions, I just always get in my head this old picture from the mid 90s where a judge made a couple divide up their Beanie Baby collection in the courtroom. He made them take the Beanie Babies and put them all out on the floor of the courtroom. And it's this picture that you can Google of this couple on their knees sorting the Beanie Babies. So once you feel like you're sorting Beanie Babies, this is what lost looks like. You have lost now, lost the plot, lost the momentum. If you're sorting Beanie Babies, things are not good. However, your money is really important. You don't have to think of your kids and your money in the same breath. I can't tell you how many women call me and go, I don't care what happens about the money as long as I get 80% of the custody or 95% of the custody or whatever it is, right? And I always say the same thing to them. I say, well, who should parent your kids is not the same question as how your assets should be divided. And I'm not going to continue to think of them as the same. I encourage you to move on. But the reason that you are talking to me is because I'm the girl who will make sure someone's watching your money. You can watch your kids. Like that's what you want to do. That's your calling as a parent. And I really respect that, which is why I'm going to watch every dollar and cent of your money to the extent that I possibly can, because you don't have to come in here and say, whatever, he can take the whole retirement as long as I get the kids. That is not a good mindset to stay in because those two things are not the same. That's not a trade.
I love that. That's a great point because you do think it's one or the other, but you can't have both.
Well, you can't
it's not
treat
the
them both
50s.
the same way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the 50s, right? It's not a thing where like he's going to have to support a woman who raises his kids and he's going to move out of the house because mom and the kids are going to stay in the house and dad gets every other weekend and a Wednesday now and then because that's what we give to dads after. We're not in the 50s. Like our laws have changed extensively since the 50s, a lot. And especially in 2017, 2018 in Illinois, our laws have changed. We now anticipate that both adults in a situation are going to be capable of earning wages. And in fact, to have a history of having earned wages, that's like what the law assumes. And so we got to work around that. The law used to assume that only one person earned wages. The law now has changed massively. It used to be that the quote unquote non-custodial parent had to pay a certain percentage of their income. I think it was 21% to the quote unquote custodial parent for child support. Now we have this thing called income shares where the number of overnights really affects how much child support each person pays the other. Because if you have quote unquote shared parenting time, meaning both of you has mostly kind of like half over 146 overnights. If both of you has more than 146 overnights, then both of you needs to spend roughly the same amount on utilities, the same number of bedrooms, the same regular stuff you got to keep to have the roof over your kid's head. That means that the amount that one has to pay the other is significantly lower since they have to maintain the same standard of living as the other one does. So it's concerns like that with respect to the way the laws have changed that are just incompatible with most people's social memory or social understanding of the way a divorce is going to go.
And that's why we're talking to you today, because we have to really, unpack those social norms around what's normal. And we found just in this short conversation today that there's really no normal.
There isn't. There's no normal except for divorce. Divorce is very normal. And there is a way to get out of it and be okay. And there's a way for your kids to be okay. And there's a way for everybody to actually, live in some hilariously Hollywood formula type commune where like in 3 years, both parents could be repartnered. Both kids could have the benefit of the new partner's family and their support as well. Maybe they have stepsisters and brothers that they really care about. Maybe they have parents who are happy. Maybe everybody has enough money. These are things that can happen. You really got to keep your eyes on the prize.
I love that. I think that's a great message because it all can get better, can be good. So thank you again for coming on today and sharing your expertise. We really appreciate it. Just to reiterate, Olivia St. Clair Long is a Purse Strings approved professional. So you can check her out on our site, pursestrings.co, and reach out to her there. Is there any other place that you like people to reach out to you?
Hi, sure. Yes. I think that the best place to reach out to us is really just our website, which is olonglaw.com. So it's OLONGLAW.com. And we have an ability to contact us there through the website. We'd be more than happy to talk to anybody. We also have a pretty developed blog that has some good information if you're only ready to lurk and not yet ready to talk.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for sharing your expertise today. Thank you, all our fearless listeners, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.
Purse Strings offers an available for hire network of vetted professionals who specialize in serving women. When you have a life event that has suddenly made money a priority, you can now move forward with a whole new confidence that you're getting advice and services from savvy professionals who are uniquely equipped to serve your needs. Go to pursestrings.co and use our directory of handpicked financial professionals when you're ready to plan for retirement, navigate divorce, buy your next home, fire up your new business, and more. Go to pursestrings.co or check the link in the show notes. Now you can be financially fearless.